we were not successful with all our initial projects. We had different ideas that, we tried to write a proposal, we tried to do something, and it was just like there were a variety of reasons of sort of crash and burn. But it took a couple of things sort of not working to then come to something that would work. And I think it was a growing process for both of us.
That was Naomi Sturm, founding executive director of Los Herederos. And this is Making It Here, a podcast by Epicenter NYC, where we spotlight the real stories behind entrepreneurs, artists, creators, and business leaders forging their own path. Every week, we dive into the hustle, the setbacks, the small wins that make the big picture possible. And every guest will have something to teach us, because making it here isn't easy. I'm your host, Amber Castillo. In the 74th Street Roosevelt Avenue subway station in Jackson Heights, a once empty storefront now houses Los Herederos, a nonprofit blending radio, archives, and public programs to document communities across Queens. The idea took shape in 2015 with a bilingual multimedia project, but the team quickly realized the need for something larger. They built Los Herederos to serve the whole of Queens, using film, photography, radio, and exhibitions to tell stories across communities and to create an archive that would preserve those histories long-term. Today, Naomi shares lessons on starting small, defining your mission, and navigating the reality of shrinking arts funding. Let's jump in. Here's my conversation with Naomi.
My name is Naomi Sturm Vijaysinha. I am the founding executive director of Los Herederos.
What is Los Herederos?
So Los Herederos is a media arts and documentary storytelling nonprofit organization based in and around Queens, New York. And Los Herederos does many different things, from the production of various types of documentary pieces, such as film or radio podcasts, different types of transmedia web publications. But we also do a lot of public programming and public engagement through a space that we have in the 74th Street Roosevelt Jackson Heights subway station that actually has a community radio station for Queens there. And there's also an exhibition space. So we do public events there, also out in the streets of Queens and at venues. And another fundamental part of our organization is the archives. So we are a community archive that is a mix of projects that are our own, and also we do accept and support other people's collections, so residents and artists and people like that. So that's sort of a very brief overview.
How did the idea come about?
So we've been around formally since 2015. The full idea and concept came about in 2015. We incorporated as a nonprofit actually in 2017. But the idea was the product actually of many years of work and thought and experience and friendship between myself and co-founders of the organization. The founding artistic director, Mauricio Bayona, and I go back much more than 10 years, but he comes from a background in film, more visual direction. I come from a background in anthropology and folklore and community organizing work. And then we had two other co-founders, Camilo Correa and Diana Bejarano. We had that connection of all being from Queens and having a real passion for this kind of documentary storytelling in our communities and with our communities. We came up with the idea for Los Herederos, and it was born from an initial project, which actually became one of our flagship media projects. It's a web publication that's called The Inheritors, and so that's a publication that is transmedia in focus. So it has photo, video, audio, bilingual writing. All what I mean by transmedia, I'm saying telling one story thread through multiple mediums. And so, we didn't quite know what it was at that time, but we were coming up with that. And then he sent it to me and he said, "What do you think about this? What do you think about the name, Los Herederos?" And I said, I love the idea. I love the project. But, if you want to really create an organization, we need to have a mission that's beyond one project, right? And also beyond one community, right? If we're going to serve Queens, the question is, do you want to serve, is this a project that's based around one community of practice or one cultural community, or is it something that we want to make a larger point of service? And so we opted obviously for the second, and so then we began a process of really defining what the organization was, who it serves, how it serves, and all of those things. And it's been a developmental, incremental, I should say, process ever since.
What was it in particular that drew you together into something where you could really see a partnership?
I would give a bit of the credit of that vision to Mauricio. He saw me as someone that he could work with and who would have a sensitivity to his vision and things that were important to him. So he actually reached out. I remember he's like, we should have a coffee and like talk about project. He had questions for me, like how did I visualize a project? How did I fundraise for a project, get things to happen, which I also think is a dynamic between the roles, right? Because he's an artistic person. He's a filmmaker. He's a documentarian. I'm also a creative person, but my training in public folklore is also to assist people. I am that person who's usually like navigating infrastructure and like figuring out what to do. And then after that, we hit it off. We kind of had that connection. And then, it took some time. I don't want to sugarcoat the process because I think a lot of people think starting a nonprofit or finding a business partner are things that just sort of happen, and they're not I don't really think for anyone. I mean, it's a lot of work, and working with someone really well over a long period is also a lot of work. It's not a romantic relationship, but it's like a marriage. You either put into it and work it out, or you don't. It's not something that's just like everything is perfect all the time. And actually, in the beginning, I mean, we were always friends. We never had like interpersonal problems, but we were not successful with all our initial projects. We had different ideas that, we tried to write a proposal, we tried to do something, and it was just like there were a variety of reasons of sort of crash and burn. But it took a couple of things sort of not working to then come to something that would work. And I think it was a growing process for both of us. We were obviously young when we met. And by the time we started Los Herederos, we were more adult. We had worked in other places. We'd also had a number of bad professional experiences that taught us, but they're good, right? Because they teach you what you would do differently. And so I think we also came together over a lot of like, why can't we do it like this? What's, like, we both really wanted to do our own thing, and I think that brought us together. And also that we both have that, we don't quit easily, right? We're both very, like, we keep scraping the wall, and so I think that, we were well suited to each other over time, but we also both worked really hard to clarify what we wanted to do because the options are limitless. You do have to pick a focus.
Yeah. And especially for aspiring entrepreneurs, if you could speak to at least maybe one of those false starts and maybe what you learned from it, if you could speak more specifically to it.
The one example I remember was that Mauricio has an archive of documentation that he's been working on with gaita musicians. Colombian gaita is an instrument from the Sierra Nevada. It's well known at this point in the United States as sort of a Colombian folk music genre. And he had worked for many years. I mean, before I met him, he actually had, since he had come to the United States, he had been transnationally documenting these artists because he came at a time when a lot of these artists were also either coming to live in the United States or had begun to tour a little bit. Some of the famous groups had begun to tour. And at that time, we're talking about the early 2000s. I mean, Colombian music was not ubiquitous. I mean, there were Colombian people, but the traditional music was not common the way we understand it in New York City today. So he had a very unique project that focused on that moment, and he was interested in making a film about it. We're still interested in making a film about it, which tells you that we haven't done it yet. But I think, an example of that early on was him sort of saying, let's see if we could make a film about this, and I actually found the proposal to that a couple of months ago, from many years ago. And And I read it and I said, oh, this is better than I remember, because what I remember was us trying to figure out what he wanted to say in the film, but my also trying to articulate that in a way that I believed could get funded. At the time, we didn't know each other well, so I didn't know how to help him articulate to me what he wanted to do. I'm not sure he knew exactly what he wanted to do. There were questions around just the volume of material. The archive was not well preserved or organized yet. I really didn't know that much about like the film and media world at that time, because I was very much more in an academic kind of framework. I think that was an example of like putting a lot of effort into something and then it kind of just being like, oh, I can't deal with this. And like, this isn't going to work out. But what it showed us over many years, obviously, was that if you want to do a good documentary film, the archive is paramount, right? It showed us the importance of the archive. So one of the things that Los Herederos is a community archive, and that collection is now a part of our community archive. It's something that we are working on digitizing, organizing, preparing so that if and when we can make such a film, the material is accessible, right? And it's there. Permissions are clear and all of those things. It showed us that it's easier to fundraise for projects like that if you have a base, which is a nonprofit, which is actually something that I sort of was important to me early on, which was I don't feel like things should be a one-off. I feel like you should have a purpose with what you're doing. And Mauricio believes that as well. So basically what that showed us was we needed to create Los Herederos before we could embark on some of these other projects. And we would decide as we went how important X or Y project was. But the bigger thing was to have a purpose and a mission that was grounded in who we are as people, but also in community, in our neighborhoods, and to have something that was sustainable both for others, but also for us, so that it wasn't so erratic, because it's hard to be successful with large creative projects when you don't have a base.
It sounds like having that space right at 74th and Roosevelt, where a lot of people are going in and out, it's literally at this hub of all these communities. It also allows for that continuing conversation where it's not just one project and another project. If you could speak a little bit about the origin story of that space and how you got that funded through the MTA and what your hopes are for that space.
Yes. So the space is interesting. That's really the most recent manifestation of Los Herederos. So we, for many years, did not have a space. We are a digital media organization, so we don't 100% need a space to do all the projects that we do. But increasingly, we were interested in having a space because we had a web radio station. And we felt like we really want to develop that into a Queens community radio station. And we can't really do that without a physical place for people to come and produce and have shows. We also had an exhibit. Speaking of the archive, we had been engaged in what has really become one of our flagship initiatives, which was a community archiving project about Diversity Plaza in Jackson Heights. We had worked with Library of Congress and also Insight, which is connected to Oral History Institute at Columbia. And we had developed this archive and we had done a lot of programming and we wanted to do an exhibition to activate it. And we wanted to do something in the plaza or in that neighborhood. But, Jackson Heights is an interesting place. It has so much and it has a lot of artists and creative people, but there's a limited amount of community space. It's a very tightly packed in community. It's a rapidly gentrifying community, and access is an issue in our neighborhood. And we didn't know what we were going to do. We were kind of on the hunt. And actually, I remember we were saying, "Oh, it'd be great if we could, use one of these spaces in the train that are like abandoned and nobody's using them. How do you rent those?" And then actually, one of we get money from New York State Council on the Arts, and our grant program director there, Fabiana Chu Rinaldi, sent me an email and said, I heard that there's this new program with the MTA where they're going to pilot, giving abandoned spaces to arts organizations to rehab them and use them for things. You should apply. And we did. And it worked out. We were part of the pilot of the program. and they gave us a space in the 74th Street train station. It was just after so much waiting and patience and hard work, like all the pieces just started to fall into place. And it was like one thing didn't work out. So this, and then all of a sudden we were in a really ideal space for what we were trying to do. And so in July of 2024, we actually got the keys and moved in, or a little bit before that. And with our creative team, which is a 6-person creative team, we rehabilitated that space. It had been abandoned for many years.
I'm interested if you could speak to what this space has represented from folks since you opened.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we've learned since opening, and really from day one, just with the response to even our opening, was how thirsty people were for a space like this and for programming like this, and how meaningful it really was. Kind of anecdotal experiences that stick out for me. One was after we launched the radio, we actually started to have a radio show that was based off that Diversity Plaza Project archive, which is the slogan for that project is documenting as resistance. And so we were interviewing a gentleman, Mr. Park, who is the owner and operator of Four Seasons Uniforms in Diversity Plaza. He's one of the longest standing business owners there. He's been there for over 30 years. And he came and he did the first interview for that radio show. He came to the opening too. And I remember when he came to the opening, and then again when he did the show, he brought me flowers. And he was like really excited. And he's like, I never thought I would like see something like this in the train. I never thought I would tell my story like this on the radio in the train. For him, he said it was just such an emotional experience getting to tell his life story after so many years in a way that was, obviously people, he's out and about. He's a community spokesperson, but a lot of traditional media are telling current events and certain types of stories, think short form, but oral history is different, right? When you take the time and you sit down to really like document and archive someone's life story and to represent that creatively in an exhibit, I think he was really moved by that because this is his immigrant story, right? His kind of, I mean, not to sound corny, but really his story is like, his American dream. I mean, he's someone who has had a lot of success, in his own way. There's so many people's stories that have gotten layered and interwoven into the space already. And that on its own is really a profound part of our mission. And so I think the space has really amplified and allowed us to be that much more impactful with the things that are important to the organization.
What do you say is the biggest challenge that you guys are facing right now?
We're challenged right now. Like, I think our industry is challenged. When I say that, I mean the arts and culture world, nonprofits certainly, but also other formats, other kinds of things. But nonprofits, we rely on money from competitive grant opportunities to operate. That's been the historic model. Of course, the strongest funding portfolio is a diverse and varied one. And so, we have other ways and we strive. And I think nonprofits are striving to have many other ways they generate income. But the changes in public funding at the federal, and then we're seeing them now at the federal level, but we will experience the trickle-down effect to the state, the city, the local, Yeah. The changes in public funding, just in terms of money and agencies existing, is a problem, and it's affecting us as it is affecting everyone. There's also people are getting penalized now for doing certain kinds of work. Los Herederos has never been an exclusive organization. As I said, we don't serve only one group. We serve all people. And as much as we make the case for underrepresented cultures, languages, traditions, groups of people, we also serve well-represented languages, cultures, groups. I mean, we work with folk culture, and folk culture is something that everybody has. Everyone doesn't have the same folk culture, but everyone has folk culture. And so we see that as a tremendous resource. And we've always been at the forefront of communities in contact. We've never been with one group or another group or playing favorites like that. What we're interested in is how diverse communities interact with each other and how new things are created that are uniquely American things, that are uniquely New York things. But that can be read in different ways. And certain groups that we absolutely do work with and have a commitment to are being really, really negatively attacked and impacted right now. So, in terms of how, Los Herederos will be affected, I don't know yet. I don't think any of us really know. We are seeing changes in money and things like that. But I'd say our biggest challenge right now is we're a relatively young organization. We're small. We were just at a point where we were starting to get access to more resources and opportunities. We were starting to be more well known. And now the ecosystem is all screwed up. And so my concern is that small, and not just us, but organizations like us, small orgs like us doing really fundamental work at a high level with very little resources will be forgotten about or overlooked by foundations and larger entities because suddenly there's a capacity issue, right? Big organizations, money likes money. Larger places or places that just have access to different connections and resources, if those places are smart, they'll want to feed the ecosystem and bring organizations along with them, just as we think, because there's always going to be people that have more and people that have less, right? But how do we work together? Who do you bring with you when you have certain opportunities? I hope that people in the ecosystem of arts and culture, that we're able to be kind to each other and not forget that everyone is struggling and we really need to spread resources and also respect that not everyone has the same connections, not everyone has the same time and ability to get in front of certain types of audiences. So I hope equity is still at the forefront of some of those conversations because it's rough out there, and I think we'll be okay because we're used to, as I said, not having that much. But at the same time, I am worried about that because we do need a certain amount of resources just to sustain the space and, keep doing the work because at the end of the day, people's creativity is not going to go away. The question is, how well will it be supported?
And how can folks, if they want to share their story or connect with you guys about opportunities, how can they do that?
There's a couple different ways. So if you're interested in having a radio show, or donating records or music, really could be digital as well. If you're interested in donating music or time to the radio station, you should email lhradio@losherederos.org. That's LOSHEREDEROS.org. If you are interested in sharing your story or information about your experiences with the space, you can feel free to reach out to me at my email, which is nsturm@losherederos.org. And the same goes if you have ideas for opportunities for the organization, or you just want to sit down and chat about ways that we might be able to work together. Our door is always open. And those are the best ways. The other great way is to actually visit us in the space. We are open Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 11 to 7. You can stop by. We're on the lower mezzanine of the 74th Street, Roosevelt Ave, Jackson Heights subway station. That's also another great way to get in touch.
Lastly, is there anything you'd like to share that people should really look for?
Well, definitely, check out our Documenting as Resistance Community Archive collection about Diversity Plaza. That is on view in the space. You can learn more about it on the web. And the full archive is actually forthcoming as on a web platform as well. It's not quite there yet, but we definitely want people to be in the know and using our archives. So that's number one. And the radio, please follow us on the radio, tune in, find ways to get involved.
Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about Los Herederos, visit them at their space in the 74th Street Roosevelt Avenue subway station or online at losherederos.org. That's all for today. Thanks for supporting us as we do our best to support our community. We couldn't do it without you. For more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at epicenter-nyc.com.